I've taken the time to study the All-22 coaches film from the Buffalo Bills preseason finale against the Carolina Panthers, and I'm sharing my top takeaways with you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, folks, welcome in. The preseason is over, but we have one more All-22 review to get to from the preseason. And so we're going to do that here today. I'll share with you my top observations from the Bills' preseason loss to the Carolina Panthers. We'll start talking offense, then we'll get to defense. We'll talk studs and duds. And then there's a couple of roster things that I want to discuss to close out the podcast. One is an interesting note on Matt Milano, and then the other is the Bills made a handful of initial moves as they are required to get down to 53 players on the active roster by Tuesday at 4 o'clock Eastern time. So the Bills made their first initial batch of moves to help with that. So plenty to get to here on this episode. Let's get into it, and let's start with what I think is the story of the preseason for the Buffalo Bills, and it's young offensive line development. The Bills have a nice pipeline of young offensive linemen brewing. And I think the signature name right now is a name that I did not expect, and that's Tylan Grable, Bills' late day 3 pick out of UCF. He's had a really strong preseason, and if you remember the All-22 review episode that we did coming out of the Bears game, I had a lot of high praise for Tylan Grable, and I think he's just stacked quality performance on top of quality performance, and I just am really excited about this young man's future for the Buffalo Bills. I thought this was his best game of the preseason. And what's fun is he started the game and he went up against, the Panthers' top group of pass rushers. Now, they didn't play Jadeveon Clowney, but other guys that are going to factor into that starting Panthers defense, he was going up against early in the game. And you saw a lot of advanced stuff for a guy that I thought was pretty raw at Central Florida. And boy, oh boy, has he really come along. I think he wins with a lot of different things. I mean, obviously he's a really outstanding athlete, but it's how he utilizes his physical tools to win battles. Really, really smooth, quick, efficient footwork. You see a lot of different sets with him, his pass sets. He's a very good vertical setter. You saw some good jump sets in the quick game against Carolina. And then, of course, he'll give you the 45-degree sets, and his ability to just frame those pass rushers is outstanding. And he has such a natural feel for angles and how to really set up what I like to call, roadblocks when these pass rushers are trying to get up the arc and win around the outside hip of the offensive tackle. You got to be able to set up those roadblocks to cut off that rush. And his footwork is really on point to frame those pass rushers and really put them in a position where they can't get to his edges. And he couples that with really, really efficient handwork. He's got good length, and he does a good job of maximizing that by using his hands independently. One of the big things that offensive linemen need to be able to do, particularly at tackle, is use each hand independently. You can't be out there two-hand striking. You have to be able to fit your hands and then play off of that with your other hand. And he does such a good job with that. He wins with hand placement. He wins with timing and with his punch. And he's got really good grip strength. This is probably one of the bigger surprises, is just how good he is at setting the clamps. Once he gets his hands fit, he doesn't let them go. He's got really, really good grip strength. And then just some of the adjustments he was making in the run game on the fly. Bills ran a decent amount of zone in the game against Carolina, and to see him just kind of have a really natural feel for the defense and how to cut off blocks and take good angles. Really, really strong work from Tylan Grable. I couldn't be more impressed with the preseason that he had as a rookie, especially given what I watched at Central Florida. And you take him and you also couple him with Ryan VanDemark, who I think was in some ways the Tylan Grable of last preseason. So back-to-back years, you have really dynamic athletes with great size emerging during the preseason. And I don't want to get too crazy here, but you wonder how much the development of these two young tackles, both Tylan Grable and Ryan VanDemark, plays into any decisions that the Bills have with Spencer Brown, who's in a contract year. You know, do you want to pay him a healthy contract, probably north of $15 million a season, or is he a let walk guy? You get a compensatory pick and you lean into these young players and have Grable versus VanDemark to be the starting right tackle in 2025. It's an interesting conversation to have, and I think we've seen enough flashes from both players to feel like next year that could be the type of role that they're in for. And obviously the season will play itself out. You never know what's going to happen during the year. But talk about a couple of good-looking young tackles in Grable and VanDemark, with Grable being the rookie and the guy that I think really stole the show for me on offense this preseason. Couldn't be more satisfied with where he's at. Also, I really enjoyed Sedrick Van Pran Granger, Bills' fifth-round pick out of Georgia, a rookie. He started and played a good amount of that game against Carolina, and it was kind of the player I watched in college, which I think is a tremendous compliment. Very powerful player, does well to play with leverage and create some movement in the run game. I thought that's where he really shined, was his ability to move bodies at the line of scrimmage in the run game and open up some holes. But his pass protection continues to be strong. He had a lot of one-on-one reps against NFL defensive tackles, Derek Brown, Shy Tuttle, A'Shawn Robinson. Those are guys that are going to play a lot of snaps. Those are good NFL defensive tackles, and he held his own against those guys. And so whether it was in pass pro, run game, getting up to the second level, combo blocking, and having good timing in the run game, I thought he looked strong like he did every single week. And I think both of those young offensive linemen, Grable and Van Pran Granger, showcased themselves extremely well this preseason. And so the Bills just have this nice pipeline of young offensive linemen right now. We talked about Grable and Van Pran Granger, Ryan VanDemark. Alec Anderson is part of this group. I'm really comfortable with where he's at. He's got some nasty to him, and I think that's what I can really appreciate him. He's versatile, he's physical, and he's athletic as well. So just where this offensive line is at just feels really healthy to me, where we're just talking about four good-looking young offensive linemen that I feel good as depth and potentially developmental starters. But then you also look at the makeup of the starters. You have two guys on rookie contracts in Torrance and Brown. Then you have another starter in David Edwards that's on a very modest deal. So what Aaron Kromer is getting out of this group is really, really impressive to me, and I'm excited to see how the starters fare in year 3 under Aaron Kromer in kind of a big year for this group, as they've had some transition, but they've also become – this offensive line has come a bit of the identity of this offense in some ways, where it's – in the past it was, Josh Allen, of course, but Stephon Diggs. I think this offensive line is going to unlock a lot for this offense, whether it's the run game or allowing Josh Allen to function and maybe win a little bit more from the pocket. So really excited about where this offensive line is at. And I think a lot of that is rooted in the young players that they have on this offensive line. A couple of other notes here on offense. I wanted to focus a little bit on these running backs, Darrynton Evans and Frank Gore. You watch the tape, you kind of get an understanding of what exactly happened. The live broadcasts are great. You get a feel, but you don't really know. I think you'd watch the game and you feel like both these guys played pretty well. But I actually came away a bit disappointed from what I saw from Darrynton Evans. He had 3 carries, and I would say that his vision and decision-making was questionable on all 3. And he was productive. 3 carries, I think, for 15 yards. It wasn't like they weren't productive carries, but you felt like there was a lot of meat on the bone when you get a chance to watch the goal line angle and just see the decisions that he made with the ball. He's definitely a player that I think throughout the preseason, I've noticed that he's really eager to work to the sideline. And there are just plenty of instances where the gap is really clear north-south, but he wants to keep pressing towards the sideline and get too far lateral, and he just leaves a lot of meat on the bone. And I get it. He's a big-time athlete. He's used to being able to win foot races and just outrun people. But that's man, you got to be able to get north-south. And I thought there was too much pushing too deep into the gap, trying to get lateral when it's just like, buddy, get downhill. There's a lot of space. You could be even more productive. So I thought he had some real issues with that, despite some productive carries. On the contrary, I thought Frank Gore, his tracks that he took with the ball were much more nuanced. Really good feel for navigating some tight quarters. I thought he felt the leverage of blocks well, even if he was a little bit of a tick late to make a decision. I think he knew where he wanted to get, and it was more just timing and reps with the blockers, right? I think it's kind of difficult for him to really feel that out in a short period of time to understand, how his offensive linemen are going to take on specific blocks. But it felt like his intent was really good. Over 100 yards, obviously, on 18 carries. I love the way that he finished runs, and he's not a big dude at all, like actually very small for a running back. But his contact balance and ability to kind of finish runs was something that definitely popped for me when watching the game. So I thought his tracks, his decision-making, his vision was superior to Darrynton Evans. And so I think you can look at Evans and appreciate the athleticism and the wiggle and the twitch and all of that. And you certainly, compared to Frank Gore, it's night and day. I think Frank Gore is athletically deficient. I mean, significantly deficient. But as far as nuanced, instinctive running, Gore, I think, just offers a lot more than Evans. So it was kind of fun to get clarity or more clarity on both of those players from watching the game. And so I focused a lot of my attention on those players when studying the All-22 in the second half. I mean, I don't think there's a player that played in the second half offensively that's going to make the team. So I focused mostly on the first half there. And that's where I wanted my attention to be, and that's where I wanted this analysis to fall. All right, on the other side of it, I have a lot of defensive comments to make. That was one that we really dove in all the way through. I wanted to pay attention to who was playing late in the game, how guys performed, young linebackers. We got a lot to get to on the defense. We'll do that here in just a moment. Be sure to stick with me. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, let's talk defense. Obviously, not a great day collectively for the Bills defense. Gave up a lot of yards, a lot of points, a lot of yards through the air. So there's a lot to get into here. And I focused in on these young linebackers, Joe Andreessen, of course, and Edefuan Ulofoshio. I wanted to see both of these guys. And we'll start with Ulofoshio, who only played 15 snaps against Pittsburgh, didn't play against the Bears in week 1. And so we saw him play extensively in this game. I think he played almost the entire game after the first series. Deion Jones got the first series, and then you saw Ulofoshio play a ton. And I liked what I saw. I thought his run game instincts were terrific. Leveraged the ball, leveraged his gaps, was instinctive, got to his spots, was able to play off some contact. I thought he was very slippery when working off contact, and that was very impressive to me. I thought he had some pretty good reps in coverage. I think maybe the rep that leaves a lasting impression on some people's minds was the wheel route that he was one-on-one with the running back on kind of this. I wouldn't even call it a wheel route. It was a shallow cross from the opposite side that turned into a wheel route whenever the play got off script, and that quarterback had forever to throw the ball. Nobody can get him on the ground, and Ulofoshio has to carry this running back, and it's Shearwood out of Monmouth. I think his name is Jameen Shearwood, and he ran 4.45 at the combine. He's he's a very fast player. And that's a tough assignment for a linebacker to have to hold on to that coverage for that long. And so eventually he's able to kind of turn up the field. And I thought Ulofoshio was right in phase with him up until that turn. And then he got like a step, and it was a good throw as the quarterback was jumping up in the pocket, or jumping forward, or moving forward in the pocket. So I don't really fault him for that. That was an impossible assignment. I liked what I saw from Ulofoshio, and I wanted to gain some comfort in him because I thought the Bills had some challenging decisions to make with their linebacker depth. And whether or not Ulofoshio was kind of the stash on IR for the season type guy, or can this guy actually help you? I came away from that game feeling pretty good about his chances to help in a reserve role and on special teams. So Ulofoshio, nice job. Which then gets us to Joe Andreessen, and I know that that's a name that everybody was monitoring. I think he came back down to earth in some ways. I do think he still had some nice moments. There were some very good instances of him playing downhill, and my favorite thing about him is his ability to stack and shed blocks, disengage, and then make a play. Like when he's able to do that, he looks really, really strong. And he even had a couple of positive reps in coverage. Particularly one was a mesh route or mesh concept where he did a great job of capping one side of that, and it really forced Bryce Young to work deeper into the snap when he was able to take that throw off the menu, and Bryce Young was able to keep the play alive and eventually make a completion down the field. But the fact that he made him work deeper into the snap, I thought was a positive moment. But I think I'm probably left thinking more about the blunders from Joe Andreessen, both in coverage and against the run. I thought he had some run fits where he completely was out of position, where I thought he was guessing and really just ran completely out of his fit. The Panthers had a drive in the game where they really kind of leaned into the rushing offense and had some big runs at the end of the drive to cap it off. And Joe Andreessen's your guilty party there. Now, he didn't get a lot of help from what was in front of him on a couple of those plays, but just not – I thought he was guessing. I thought he was reading the backfield action and taking himself out of his run fit, and he opened up some creases with that for Carolina. And then in coverage, certainly not showcasing a ton of feel for zone coverage. And obviously he gives up the receiving touchdown and the opening touchdown drive for Carolina, where I guess the silver lining with that play is I don't think he had the right play call. I think everybody else did exactly what you would expect on that play, except for he all of a sudden just like buzzes down to play man coverage on the back out of the backfield. And clearly it wasn't his guy. He was the middle of the field zone defender, but he takes off on his horse and tries to cut off this route that the running back's running. And meanwhile, the tight end's just crossing his face, go right in the middle of the field for a touchdown. So I think he just had the wrong play, which is not good, right? You gotta be on the same page, especially as a Mike linebacker. That's an important part of what you do. But it wasn't like he was physically deficient or it was like a on-the-moment processing error. I think he just literally didn't have the right play, and he did something else, and it cost the team. But I think there's an explanation for it, which is helpful. But I think he was okay. Certainly, I don't think you could say he doubled down on what he did against Pittsburgh. It was much more of a mixed bag of a performance out of Andreessen. One more note on linebackers, Deion Jones. It was a tough go for him, and he's already been released. And I'll tell you what, I put my initial 53-man roster projection, I tweeted it out on Sunday morning, and that was before I watched the tape, and I had Deion Jones making the team. If I would have watched this tape before putting out the 53-man roster projection, there's no chance I would have put Deion Jones on it. He struggled. And I thought he was pretty solid his first two preseason games, but this was tough. I mean, he was stuck on blocks like crazy. He just couldn't clear contact. And then even some of his coverage was rough, where I thought his transitions, being able to flip his hips and turn and drive on routes was pretty segmented. He lost his footing a couple of times and gave up some completions. So it was a rough go for him. And I think the real tell about Deion Jones' status on the team was late in the game. He came back in, like the last couple drives of the fourth quarter, he came back in, which was not a good sign. Not a good sign for your chances of making the roster. So rough go for Deion Jones as he likely moves on. Maybe he'd be back on the practice squad. We'll see, but that was not a strong performance for him. All right, some other defensive notes here. Jamarcus Ingram, I want to get into him because I think that he's a guy that's in line to be a 53-man rostered player, provide some depth particularly in the slot and a little bit of outside corner. I think he made the team with what he did on Carolina. Or if he was 75-25 making it, I think that he answered any final questions. Loved his ability to fit the run. I thought he did extremely well with that, both from the slot and from outside alignments in terms of a perimeter corner. But really competitive guy in coverage. I think that's shown up throughout the preseason. Was targeted one-on-one in the red zone against Diontae Johnson. And Diontae Johnson's a good NFL wide receiver. And I thought Ingram did a good job of leveraging the route, staying in phase, and then not allowing the completion. And I know that you could probably make a case that there was some contact just before the ball got there. He was kind of leaning in, which I think is smart. I think it was good technique by him to kind of lean in, get his shoulder in there and make it, kind of restrict that catch point a little bit. But obviously got to turn around and get his head around. But no call, so no flag. But I thought it was a good competitive rep against an outstanding starter in the National Football League. So I think Jamarcus Ingram kind of solidified his role on this team. Daequan Hardy, the strong preseason continues. I think in so many ways, you're coming out of this preseason thinking about two players, and it's Tylan Grable and it's Daequan Hardy. Grable on offense, Hardy on defense. Hardy gets a big-time tackle for loss against the run. I like the play. He was it was a close set to his side. He was the outside corner, and he was responsible for the D gap, and there was a ton of space. And I like that he didn't slow play it and put him in a position where he gave that running back kind of a runway to set up his move. No, he got downhill. He took the air out of the play and played it tight off the edge there and made a nice tackle for loss. And then he was tested vertically down the field again in this game and gave up a pass breakup. He did give up some separation on that play, but it almost felt like he wanted to play from the trail and knew that he had a recovery speed down the field and wanted to make a play on the ball. And sometimes corners will do that to kind of bait a throw because you trust your recovery athleticism, which makes sense for a guy with like Daequan Hardy. And, he was able to get his head around and break up the pass, even though I thought he did give up vertical leverage. But it almost felt intentional. So Daequan Hardy finishes the preseason with 64 coverage snaps. He was targeted 10 times, gave up 2 catches for 13 yards, had 3 pass breakups. Outstanding for the young corner out of Penn State. Also had 2 run stuffs, which, I think he played like 104 total snaps. And so to come away with a couple of run stuffs is also pretty impressive for a 5'10", 180-pound guy that's playing on the outside. Couldn't be more impressed with him. And then, again, the decision-making improvement as a kick and punt returner in this game was also notable. I thought Kareem Jackson played well. He was targeted once in coverage, had a pass breakup on that play. And then I thought there was some really good open field tackles by him. The Bills had a lot of leaky coverage, a lot of space to fit the ball. But I thought Kareem Jackson, as a deep safety, staying leveraged over top, being able to come down and make some strong open field tackles, that was nice to see. And he also had some nice run fits from depth. I thought Kareem Jackson finished his preseason on a high note, and we'll see what his fate is ultimately. Real quick, Kinglsey Jonathan, thought it was interesting that he was playing extremely late in the game. And so I think it's a debate as to whether or not the Bills are going to keep 5 or 6 edge rushers. If they keep 6, that means there's a spot for Kinglsey Jonathan. If they keep 5, there's not. And he played late into that game, which is a bit of a tell. A note on Gable Steveson. I know that everyone's kind of interested in him. I thought he had good moments. He had bad moments. There were some instances where I thought he played the run extremely well and kind of had a feel for what the blocking scheme was trying to do and how he was supposed to, stay on top of his block and maintain his gap and maintain his fit. I think there's other times where he was just peeking in the backfield trying to find the running back and he was completely out of his fit. So very much a mixed bag from Gable Steveson. We'll see what his fate is. Probably a practice squad guy, and you kind of see where he's at next year. But overall, I thought the defensive line was pretty disappointing. A really quiet day. The pass rush just wasn't good enough. And I wanted to see more out of this group, particularly because you have some guys that have been around a little bit, and Cameron Klein and Deshaun Williams and Casey Toohill. Kinglsey Jonathan's been on the rosters. Even Javon Solomon got run early in the game, and I was hoping for them to make more of an impact. But I'll be honest, they were pretty quiet. And I thought that led to a lot of space available for the Panthers to throw the ball. I think, 340 passing yards. And Carolina had like under 170 yards their first 2 preseason games. So they definitely woke up a bit in this one. And I think courtesy of the Bills not being able to affect these quarterbacks with pass rush, and then there just being a lot of space on the back end. So those are my defensive notes, folks. On the other side of it, I'll give you my studs and duds. Want to give you my note on Matt Milano and recap the initial roster moves that the Buffalo Bills have made. Be sure to stick with me. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have a little something different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, studs and duds, Matt Milano, initial roster moves. My studs, we got a pretty healthy list of studs and duds this week. My studs, Frank Gore Jr., Tylan Grable, Sedrick Van Pran Granger, Edefuan Ulofoshio, Daequan Hardy, and Kareem Jackson. I thought those guys really stood out very positively to me. Duds, and we won't destroy these guys, but they were duds. Kevin Jarvis on the offensive line was a disaster. Casey Tuhill finally gets his chance to play, misses a couple tackles, makes no impact as a pass rusher. Kendall Williamson, I don't need to see any more of that guy. Kyron Brown, yikes. Deion Jones certainly didn't. I mean, if he was on the bubble, I think he fell off the bubble in this game. And then D. Delaney, I know he got hurt, and that's a little bit of insult to injury, but before he got hurt, that dude was out of position over and over again. So rough go for D. Delaney in terms of his play and getting injured. So those are my studs and duds. Matt Milano, there's an interesting thought that I had on Matt Milano that I want to share with you, and it's important. And it really, there's a lot that you can learn from when the Bills put him on injured reserve. There's 3 different things that they can do. They can put him on injured reserve on Monday, they can put him on injured reserve on Tuesday, or they can put him on injured reserve Wednesday or later. And when that happens, will tell us a lot about the forecast for Matt Milano. And let me tell you what the difference is on the 3 situations. If Milano's on IR on Monday, he's out for the season. That's it. You will not see Matt Milano play this year. Cut and dry. So if he goes on injury reserve on Monday, August 26th, that's it. He's done for the year. If the Bills put Matt Milano on IR on Tuesday, it's a pretty strong sign that the team believes he can return this year. And the reason for that is because under the new IR rules, he automatically counts against the 8 total players that the Bills can bring back for the regular season. And so you're only going to put him on that IR if you feel like he's going to come back, because he automatically counts against the 8 total players that you can bring back off of injured reserve during the regular season. If they wait until Wednesday to put him on IR, it tells me that there's a level of doubt that he can play this season, because if they do that, he can still be placed on injured reserve, but there's no demand for him to be designated as a player that will automatically count against the 8 that you can bring back. And that would come at the risk of you have to expose a player to waivers. But if the Bills let Matt Milano make the 53, then put him on injured reserve, they don't have to bring him back. And again, the trade-off there is that you do risk exposing a player to waivers that you probably want to bring back, but it also tells you that there's probably a level of concern that Matt Milano can come back or not. So this is what you're hoping for. You're hoping that the Bills put Matt Milano on injured reserve on Tuesday. Monday, he's out for the year. Wednesday or later, it's pretty questionable as to whether or not he can come back. It would tell me that there's a level of doubt that he can return. So pay attention to when that happens. Lastly, the Bills made some initial moves. They've got to get down to 53 players. So they're at 90, and they've made the following moves to this point. They released these players. Quarterback Anthony Brown, I still think he's a candidate to come back as QB3 on the practice squad. Wide receiver Damiere Byrd, late addition to the roster, caught 1 pass against Carolina. I think he was always signed to get cut, but I think it's good that the Bills got an exposure with him. That way, if they need some wide receiver help down the line, there's a level of familiarity. Offensive lineman Kevin Jarvis, he's been released. Defensive end Rondell Bothroyd. Linebacker Shane Simon. Linebacker Deion Jones. And cornerback Kyron Brown. The interesting thing about those two linebackers and Simon and Jones, never expected Simon to make it. I thought Jones had a chance, is the Bills are now down to 6 linebackers left. And, of course, one of those is Joe Andreessen. And every year under Sean McDermott, the Bills' initial 53-man roster had exactly 6 linebackers. So good sign for Joe Andreessen and his likelihood of making this roster. So Anthony Brown, Damiere Byrd, Kevin Jarvis, Rondell Bothroyd, Shane Simon, Deion Jones, Kyron Brown among your initial players released. And then 2 players were placed on injured reserve, both safeties. Terrell Burgess and D. Delaney placed on injured reserve. That means they're out for the season unless the Bills reach an injury settlement with those players. And then they can come back after the injury settlement, the length of time that they settle, and plus 3 weeks. So we'll see on those 2 players. They could just be actually injured and out for the whole season. So that's what we have to this point. And there's a lot more moves to come. Again, Bills have to get down to 53 players. So that means they got to release 37 guys. And they've released 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and put 2 on injured reserve. So 9 of 37 have been done. So there's a lot more to come. And of course, we're going to break it all down for you here on this podcast. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.